Yahweh? Oh! Yeah. Anyways, so you're going to get this little... It's a condensed Bible timeline. Jeff Cavins, he is kind of with the Augustine Institute a little bit. He came out with something called the Great Adventure Timeline, the Great Bible Adventure Timeline. And it's this, he has this beautiful timeline that's like super duper long, and it's a fold out. And I was doing a Bible timeline with some fifth graders back in my first year of seminary, and so I was like, how can I condense this down for them and just give them something, maybe a little visual for them to look at. So here it is. It starts off with creation and ends with the church. So from basically top to bottom, left to right, I've got some little drawings that are included in there. It's one of the things that he talked about was the bigger picture. So he really honed in on, Dr. Ted Shree really honed in on the big picture of all of this. And so these are kind of highlighting the little pictures that are kind of condensed into like 14 books of the Bible that you can look at. I don't have those listed here, but most of you guys all know these stories. You've got Adam and Eve, Noah, and then you have Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph in Egypt, and then Moses and the burning bush. There's a little burning bush there, if you can see it. And then there's Mount Sinai, it's a mountain, and then the golden calf, and then you got the milk and honey going into the promised land. And so it's just a little condensed Bible timeline for you guys. So it's a reference piece for you. I thought it would just be appropriate to kind of see those little things that kind of can really help you out.
I remember when I started teaching 6th grade Old Testament, and so I'd already finished college, and just shows you how much of a fool I was. I remember teaching, and I didn't recognize that the Old Testament, if you look at the books of the Old Testament, that a lot of the books of the Old Testament are actually retelling the same story of other books of the Old Testament. And I thought, there's got to be a lot more to know than I already know. But I realized that year that, wait a second, I already know this story. I know the story of Abraham, of Moses. I know the story of David and then Solomon, and then all of a sudden you've got the kingdom, and then you got the split between the north and the south kingdom, and then you got Babylon destroying the southern kingdom. You've got Assyria destroying the northern kingdom, and then all of a sudden the southern kingdom gets to come back home, and they try and rebuild the temple, and then the Romans take over, and there's Jesus. As simple as that. Like, whoa, that's it. That's it. But it's ultimately a story of what? It's a story of God's love for his people, and as they showed on the video, his expansion as to the way in which he revealed who his people truly are, which is every person. And now it's up to us to continue to expand that. What did we say last week? Right now, only about 1/3 of the world is Christian. And some people will say, that's so insensitive to say that it should be more than that, Father. Are you really saying that the whole world should be Christian? I'm saying, no, I say the whole world should be Catholic, not just Christian. Because I really believe that it is the truth. And it is the most beautiful life that one can live here on this earth. I wouldn't be giving my life for it if I didn't truly believe it. So what kind of questions do we have today about today's topic, or anything else you would like to ask, even from previous weeks? We'll try and go about 15 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll break down into smaller groups. Yes?
Why would God give Adam and Eve there for us free will if he punished us for using it?
Why would God give us free will if he punished us for using it? He didn't. I mean, death is a consequence of our own sin, right? If I decide to to get in an argument with my neighbor, and I punch him in the face, and he punches me back in the face, but even harder, God didn't punish me. My own foolishness punished me. Does that make sense to you? And so the whole idea, even like some people will talk about the idea of excommunication. What does the word excommunication mean? It means that you're no longer in communion with God and His church. And they're like, oh, that nasty Pope, he excommunicated this person or that person. No, a Pope's really never excommunicated anybody. The person's actions excommunicated themselves. They said, I desire not to be in union with God. And to not be in union with God will necessarily entail suffering. Even hell itself, right? Some people say, why would God send anybody to hell if He's a loving God? God has sent nobody to hell. People have chosen hell for themselves, usually demonstrated by their own actions. Their choice not to live in union and in love. And if people live an entire lifetime separating themselves from God vehemently with their actions and with their thoughts and their words and all of those things, God will respect that. God would never force anybody to go against their own will and say, I force you to be in union with me here in heaven, if their entire lifetime they had chosen against that union. And so all of the suffering is not necessarily like God punishing, as it is simply our actions causing it. And then God will permit suffering. He doesn't take it away. Just like sometimes parents have to permit suffering with their own children when they sit them in the corner and the children are crying. But they know that the longer they leave that child in the corner, the more that child understands, I really need to trust mom and dad. And that's probably a terrible analogy, but it's in accordance with what we're talking about here, with at least Him permitting certain things to exist. Next question is for Father Ryan.
Oh boy. Go ahead, Justin.
Does the church believe that God can allow someone who's suffering in hell to call up to Him and ask to go back in?
So like,
Can somebody get out of hell? Right.
can somebody get out of hell to go to heaven? Is that your question?
They are suffering from hell and they remember and
Well, the idea would be no. Like if this person has chosen to live his life away from God, they're away from God. And there's actually a kind of a theology that is kind of tied. It's not necessarily like, this is what the church teaches on it, but it's,
They don't go there. I mean, the answer is no. I mean, there's a definitive end to our life, and at that moment, our eternity, based upon our decisions in life, is determined. Well, we'll eventually be with God, or we won't. And there's no crossing that barrier. The church teaching, there's no crossing that barrier once that has taken place.
and you can look at, there's actually a story in the Bible of the Dives and Lazarus. There's a rich man who he had all the opportunity to serve this guy who was at his door, and he chose not to. And then he is in hell, and he's asking God, like, hey, I need some relief here. And it's actually Father Abraham. Abraham says, there's this chasm here, I can't do anything about it. You chose this. So, and that's what we would point to, as there's no way that you can get yourself out of hell. Yes, Jane?
So in terms of, you made a comment that your desire, God's desire is for us to be all one church. And we have this separation of religions where we have all these Protestant religions. Where do they fall in terms of people who choose to be Protestant? Where do they fall in terms of salvation?
Now this is good because this is a question that I get asked a lot. So, like people who chose not to be in union with God, or in union with the Catholic Church, okay, and they're living their life as a Protestant. And so, what would the Catholic Church's teaching be upon salvation of those who are not Catholic? Is that the question, basically? Well, here's the teaching of the Catholic Church, and this is in part why I love the Catholic Church as I do, and why I really decided to give my life to the Catholic Church, because I think that this is a profound teaching. And so the teaching always goes as such. To those who, through no fault of their own, have not chosen to be in union with God in the most profound way, which is through the Catholic Church and the sacraments. To those who, through no fault of their own, and that's the key phrase, through no fault of their own, have not entered into the most blessed perfection that you can have on this side of heaven with God in the Catholic Church, that we would say that they may be saved. We don't say for sure, because as Catholics, we don't definitively declare anybody to be in heaven or in hell. That's a reality. That we would say it's a teaching of the Church that for sure hell exists, and this is it can be a touch confusing, but we've never, as a church, declared for sure, without a doubt, this person or that person is in hell. There's some things that are pretty much, if you look at Scripture, like you have some questions about certain people, like even Judas, it would have been better had he never been born, that kind of stuff. But anyway, we still don't declare for a definitive fact. And so therefore, we can't say for sure that somebody like Mahatma Gandhi, incredible man, is in heaven. But we would say every indication is this man lived a life that desired God in a very profound way. But he never entered into the Catholic Church, and we'd even say it was probably through no fault of his own. Why? Well, what was some of his lines? He said, your Christ I love very much. It is just you Christians that I don't love because you are so unlike your Christ. And so it was not his fault, it was in many ways our fault that Mahatma Gandhi didn't become Christian, you could say. And similarly, for people who simply have lived an entire life trying to love Jesus Christ with everything they have, and for whatever reason there's the roadblocks for them coming to truly know the beauty of the Catholic Church. And we all know them. We all know Protestants that are far better than this guy, and almost as good as that guy. And we would say without a doubt that these people very likely might be saved or could be saved. We say that Jesus' grace and his power extends beyond even what we would say the sacraments are or his church. Does that make sense to you? Whereas there are certain denominations that will say there's no chance that whatever tribal member in South America who has never even heard the name Jesus Christ, there's no chance that they could be saved. And just that kind of thing boggles my mind. That also raises one more question. If, through no fault of their own, they don't know the Catholic Church, they might be saved, then why would we ever teach them about the Catholic Church? Because once they find out about the Catholic Church and its glory, and maybe experience people who have expressed it and lived it, and then they still choose against it, then there's added condemnation on that choice. And so why would we ever express the beauties of the Catholic Church to anybody? And the answer is what I said earlier. Because it is, in our opinion, and we would also say in the opinion of God, the far superior way to live life on earth. Because you can enter into a more beautiful and deeper communion with God in the Catholic Church, even receiving him bodily within you. All of the sacraments and all of the beauty of it, the teachings and the moral law and all of it wrapped together is far superior and far more beautiful than any other life that could be possibly lived on earth. And the opportunity to make it to heaven through that life is easier. It's like saying, well, could you swim the English Channel from England to France? Is it possible for somebody to swim the English Channel from England to France? The answer is yes, it's possible. But if the whole goal is getting from England to France, and you're floating past that dude in this incredible yacht. You're like, hey, keep swimming. That wouldn't make any sense. We believe the Catholic Church to be that beautiful yacht that is getting us from this side of the abyss to the next, with every grace possible, every help available. And why would we not extend that to all of humanity? And I am sorry for keeping to take this thing. These Q&A things, I just love them so much. Like, you're not the first priest that I've just like, let me talk. It happens all the time. I've even done it to bishops. You talk to some of the bishops when we do Q&As at like the junior CYO thing, or the CYO convention. I'm like, give me the mic, bishop. So anyway, I apologize for treating you like a bishop.
Well, I don't know what that means either. Hayden?
So earlier, Father Gill said that the church is not definitively declared like whether or not someone is in heaven or hell. What about the saints?
So you would catch him in a fib. So the saints are declared in heaven.
And I said it has not definitively declared anybody to be in hell, but it has.
Yeah. There you go. Yes.
So this kind of relates back to the contract where people work for 12 hours and someone else works for 1 hour and still get the same. So what if someone did their works like gave their fortunes for the first half of their life and then kind of fell off like for the second half of their life, and then like another person did the exact opposite, where he wasn't really into it for the first half of his life, but then was really into it for the second half of his life. Yeah, we kind of repeat that question.
Okay. So his question is about those who are basically accept Jesus Christ later on in life, and then there's those who have accepted Jesus early and then they kind of fell off. That's what he said. Basically denied him in such a way. So the answer would be, and it's scripture, I couldn't quote you what the scripture verse would be, but those who come in and accept Jesus Christ and are doing the good stuff that they're supposed to be doing, they're in. And those who say, like, there's the son who says, yes, I'm in. I'm going to go out in the vineyard and work, basically. And then he doesn't. Well, he doesn't get in. He didn't do it, and he denied it. And so the scripture passage, even those who are virtuous now and then do some act of misconduct, and then they die, that's their choice. It comes down to choice. And so you don't kind of do this. You make the decision, and you go and you commit to it. Kind of like, for instance, I always hear the story, like, what if Mother Teresa? We always think of Mother Teresa as this like beautiful, wonderful saint, and what if, like, right before she died, she killed a whole bunch of people? I mean, what would we do? We'd be like, what? Like, seriously, what did this happen? We would, like, second guess her whole life. Like, we would be like, that just doesn't, it's incongruous. We don't know, like, how is God going to actually be redeeming that? That's kind of a bigger issue even with what happened last week. So anyways, I like to open cans of worms, so. Don't
Open can of the worms. Leonardo. Yeah. And so the mortal sin is something we would say is a sin that has separated you from the unity of God, from communion with God. And if you die in mortal sin, it ain't looking good. So he's saying if somebody received Jesus in a very late stage of life, maybe on their deathbed, and weren't able to then go out and do works, could they still be saved? And the answer would be yeah. Yeah. We had a nice discussion last week. I'm not sure where my folks are, but Catholic Church's teaching on faith and works is ultimately, and don't get this wrong, if anybody ever says to the Catholic Church, how do you make it to heaven? Is it through your good works? The answer to that is no. We can't do anything to work our way to heaven. It's not on me. It's always because God gives us that free gift, which is called grace, the grace of his life within us, and it comes to us primarily through faith. It comes to us through faith. Okay, this is the reality. We're saved by grace through faith. But as Catholics, we recognize very distinctly that a faith without works is not a true faith. That says in James, the book of James, for example, and many other places. It says that you need to work out your salvation with fear and trembling and things like that. And so there's a real tight connection between works and faith, and you can't really have faith without works. It's a dead faith if you don't have works. And so this gentleman, who is maybe on his deathbed, well, if he's really received Jesus and seen the glory, if he gets healed, you know that he's going to be out doing those works. And so it's not like, well, sorry, you were laying in bed sick, couldn't do those works now, could you? You know, even saying a kind word, a loving word, in many ways, that's works. You know, choosing is, in fact, a doing in many ways as well. And we're going to go 2 more questions. One here, and then who's got the next one? There it is. Okay, 3. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. All right.
I guess kind of sitting off of that, deathbed situation, is there a more clear way to define, like, the line? At what point are you, I don't know how to phrase it.
At what point are you saved? Is that what you're asking?
When's your last chance?
Right.
When is your last?
Like, do you have almost done a confession, maybe
A post so, well, okay. Let's look at what does baptism do. We'll actually cover that later. Why is baptism? What is baptism and why it's necessary? Because baptism is necessary for salvation. It is what the church says is necessary because Jesus says it's necessary for us in order to be with him, okay? And so that's one thing that is necessary is baptism. And we could talk about baptism of desire and baptism, by blood and that type of stuff, but that's for another topic. And so when you're cut off, that gets into the kind of the moral, kind of craziness of we don't know. Like I'm going to say, we don't know, but it's God. God is he's going to be your last judgment. And there is it the last things, we actually cover that in a couple weeks too. I'm like trying to push your question off, and I can give it to Father Gale, but he'll tease me too. So.
What are you talking about?
Huh? I'll give him the microphone. But it comes down to God. He's going to give you the judgment, and so there's the two judgments. Let me give you.
I think your question was, can you have a post-death conversion and coming to God? And we would say the teaching is no. Now, I'd heard a priest, a priest very famous, said that at that moment of death, he kind of said, at that moment, understand that every soul will be presented by all the glories of God or that which is not God. And that soul will have that moment, that chance, that last chance at death. And what do you mean by at death? Is it like the last breath? But this is what he was saying. And he says, and for those who see God and choose him, and choose love and choose beauty, then they go to heaven. Those who see the opposite side and don't think, well, the opposite side is going to look like some ghoulish figure with his tongue out and like it's going to be horrific fire and sulfur smell. It's probably going to be the same things you've been choosing your whole life. that have led you away from God. He said, but if you choose those at death, at that moment of death, then you'll live eternally with those things which will be absent of God in love and beauty. And so, will there be that very last breath moment? But after death, the teaching is there's no going back. Okay? Next question was here? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of going back to why we can't say someone's in hell. Could you kind of explain that in a deeper way, why the church believes that we can't say that?
Why the church can't definitively say that we know who is or who is not in hell, or if there is somebody in hell. It always goes back to the fact that we're not the judge. And what Father Ryan was just saying, it's always God's judgment, and we can't say that. Now, why can we say for sure that people are in heaven? Because of the miracles that happen, praying through their intercession. These are not miracles that would have happened had they not been with God. Also, because of their life, we can see their life was a life of virtue, without scathe. That they're just time and time again, once they discovered Christ and embraced Christ, it was a life of perfect virtue. And the miracles thing. That's why you always have to hear about the miracles of the saints. Well, what miracles do they have? That's almost the proof that they are with God. And then was back there? Yeah.
So this is a follow-up and I appreciate the question. So you kind of maybe touched on describing the God and so if somebody is forming up with faith in the church and as an adult what is their salvation?
Yeah.
Along with that, if somebody is more engaged in this class, learning about the salvation, do they choose that it's not right for them? I mean, so by choosing their own makeup, they choose to believe about us. Where is that?
So the question was, what if somebody's raised Catholic and then walks away from it and goes to a Protestant church? Or what if somebody's Protestant, maybe, and walks through this class and learns much in this class but still doesn't embrace the faith? We would say that anybody who has truly ever embraced or experienced the Catholic faith in its fullness really would never walk away. Maybe they would sin, maybe they would turn to iniquity and leave God. And we would say, well, they've broken communion. But we all know as well, don't we, Catholics who were brought up in the church and have walked away from the church. We also know that those Catholics who were brought up in the church and then walked away from the church, something went awry in their catechesis. They never fully got it. They never fully experienced it. Maybe they never had that encounter. Maybe their heart was never quite open. Maybe it was just bad teachers. Maybe it was bad priests. Maybe that longing for communion, which should be so profoundly in the Catholic Church, just wasn't there because of the coldness of the people in that church. And so what they have done isn't turned away from the true goodness of God. It's turning away from perhaps the misconceived notion of what they saw the Catholic Church to be. And so we would hold out hope that even they, who were following their conscience and a pure heart, seeking to love God as well as they could. And see, that's something that breaks my heart many times. When I see church members leaving the Catholic Church to go somewhere else. And I think it breaks my heart on a couple levels, because I miss them. I'm sad about that. These were friends of mine, perhaps. But the second reason is because I feel like I shoulder some of that blame for not truly expressing the true beauty of this faith which I profess. And my own actions are maybe a part of that. My lack of being able to explain things well is a part of that. And so it does. It hurts me. It hurts. And I lose sleep at times, at nights, thinking of particular people whom I have loved that have walked away from the Catholic Church. Now, do I doubt their salvation? I still have much hope for their salvation, because I see them being in many ways a better human than I am. And yet I truly believe that God set up ordinary means of salvation, which is in the Catholic Church. Now, an interesting thing is I'm not sure how many of these questions were really tied into I think they were, though. I mean, in many ways they were. They just kind of went on this one little area towards salvation, which obviously creation, the fall, and then redemption in Jesus, and what does that look like in the church? And so I think it was good Q&A. Our 15 minutes, Father Ryan, turned into 27 minutes, and that's my fault again, but you now have some time to talk amongst yourselves on your tables. Okay, thank you.